We're going to call the McLean County Zoning Board to order. Will the secretary call the roll?
Shirley Deerwester,
Present.
Brian Bangert,
Here.
Michael Kurtz, Rick Dean, Julia Turner,
Here.
Ruth Novosad,
Here.
Jim Finnegan.
Here. We have 6 members, so we have a quorum tonight. We have no minutes to approve. Would anyone in the audience be here to talk to us about subjects that are not on the agenda tonight? If so, please come forward. Don't see anybody. I'm going to affirm the staff right now. Do you solemnly and sincerely declare and affirm the testimony you give in this case now and hearing be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, or that you suffer the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Okay, we're going to call the first case, I guess. Case SU 2307. Would you please come forward? You can sit up here. Will the secretary call the case?
This is an application of David and Ellie Wirtz for a special use to allow a rural specialty facility in the agriculture district with a waiver of the minimum distance requirement to be 10,300 feet from a residence district rather than 2,500 feet as allowed in the northwest quarter of Section 13, Township 24 North, Range 1 East to the 3rd Principal Meridian in Dry Grove Township at 3413 West Northtown Road, Normal, Illinois. Public notice of this hearing was published in the Pantograph on November 18, 2023, as provided by law. All the other required notifications have been made, and the applicant has paid the publication cost. As the first exhibit, I'd like to pass the application that includes a legal description of the property and a nuisance disclaimer indicating that they're aware of what takes place in the agriculture district, and a zoning map showing where this property is located in Dry Grove Township in the agriculture district, and an aerial photo, and a plat map showing where this property is located in Dry Grove Township, and a communication from the health department indicating they're okay with the proposed septic system on the property, and a communication from the Township Road Commissioner indicating that he's okay with the 2 entrances that are used, the existing access for the residents and another one for the parking area. And a site plan that shows a floor plan of the building in which they propose to have the activities, as well as some photos of the rooms in which they're going to be taking place. And a narrative which was used in how I prepared the staff report and indicating how they want to use the property. And as an attachment, there's a well agreement that there's a shared well between this property and a neighboring property to the south that I've passed. And there's a communication from Kickapoo Drilling Company that the applicant is proposing to drill a new well to alleviate some of the concerns over the shared well. This is the plat map on the wall here showing where this property is located. And if you see the light tan, that's the R1 district, and that's 10,300 feet away from the subject property, which is outlined in red there. And then this is an aerial photo of the property, and you can see the area. It's a 5-acre property. You can see the relatively large area of grass where they would use for parking, and they grow hay there. This is the public road, Northtown Road. The property is to the left or to the south, and this is facing west. And this is facing east, and the property is to the right. And this is across the road to the north. It's a farm field, and this is the entrance to the parking area that's in the grassy field here. And you can see the residence to the north or to the right. And this is the main driveway to the house, and this is the house on the right. And that's a better picture of the dwelling. This is one of the buildings on the property. And this is a kind of a greenhouse that they use to grow vegetables. And this is the barn in which they're going to propose to use for their classes and restroom and office. And this is as you're moving more toward the west. And there's some animals, some goats, and out to the straight ahead out there. And if you look to the next photo, you'll see some chickens and ducks and turkey and a dog and some llamas. And I'll deliver the staff report at this time. The topography is relatively flat. The property has 641 feet of frontage on the south side of Northtown Road. The drainage is to the west. The vegetation is crops, grass, and trees. Northtown Road is 18.5 feet in width and oil and chip road. The surrounding zoning is agriculture district on all sides. The land to the north, east, and west is in crop production. There's a residence and crop production to the south. The analysis of the 7 standards as they apply to this request is as follows. The proposed special use will not be detrimental to or endanger the health, safety, morals, comfort, or welfare of the public. This standard is met. The applicants own a 5-acre property on which they grow vegetables and raise alpacas. I didn't say alpacas, I said the wrong kind of animal. I'm sorry about that. They grow turkeys, chickens, ducks, and geese. They propose to develop a rural specialty facility where they sell fruits and vegetables grown on the property, provide farm tours, and provide classes on such things as canning, plant and herbal identification, seed saving techniques, soap, salves, lotions, sustainable small farming techniques, animal husbandry, and small farm disaster preparedness. The class size will be a maximum of 45 people. However, most classes would be capped at 12. Classes would be offered to 2 to 5 times per week, and each class would be for 2 to 3 hours. Overall operations would be from May through October. If food is provided, there would be no on-site food preparation, and only third-party caterers would be allowed to serve food on the property. One of the buildings on the property, called Barn 2, has a 750 square foot room that would be used for classes, meetings on the ground floor. There's also a restroom, an office, and a seating lab on the ground floor of Barn 2. The property has 70-foot by 30-foot greenhouse on which the applicants grow vegetables and herbs. One of the use standards for a rural specialty facility limits the maximum distance from a residence district to no more than 2,500 feet. The limited activity and intensity of the proposed special use and location, approximately 3/4 of a mile from Ropp Road or County Highway 39, would support a waiver of this requirement to allow it to be 10,300 feet from a residence district. 2, the proposed special use will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity for purpose already permitted or substantially diminish property values in the area. This standard is met. Surrounding properties that are in crop production or used as a residence would continue to be desirable for such use. A residence to the southwest shares a well with the subject property, and the owner of this residence is concerned that the special use will negatively impact the water supply for that residence. And that's why the applicant has arranged with Kickapoo Drilling to alleviate this concern. Number 3, the proposed special use will not impede the orderly development of the surrounding property for uses permitted in the district, and this standard is met. The proposed special use is adjacent to properties that are used for crop production and for single-family residence and would continue to be suitable for such uses. Adequate utilities, access roads, drainage, or other necessary facilities have been or will be provided, and this standard is met. The property has 641 feet of frontage on the south side of Northtown Road and is located approximately 3/4 of a mile from Ropp Road. The Health Department recommends approval of the special use. The Carlock Fire Protection District will provide fire protection for the property. 5, adequate measures have been or will be taken to provide ingress and egress so designed as to minimize traffic congestion in the public streets, and this standard is met. It appears that safe sight distance can be provided at the existing entrances. The Dry Grove Township Road Commissioner approved the 2 accesses for the proposed use. Adequate off-street parking would be provided as well as 1 paved ADA parking space. 6, the establishment, maintenance, and operation of the special use will be in conformance with the intent of the district in which the special use is located, and this standard is met. The preamble states, provide for the location and govern the establishment and operation of land uses which are compatible with agriculture and are such a nature that their location away from residential, commercial, and industrial areas is most desirable. And 7, the proposed special use in all other respects conforms to the applicable regulations of the district in which it is located, and this standard is met. Staff recommends that this application meets the standards set forth in the county code, and provided the uses are limited to selling fruits and vegetables grown on the property, providing farm tours, and providing classes on such things as canning, plant and herbal identification, seed saving techniques, soap, salves and lotions, sustainable small farming techniques, animal husbandry, and small farm disaster preparedness, provided class sizes limited to 45 people, and provided public activity is limited to the ground floor of any structure on the property. And that concludes my report.
Would you guys like to be sworn in for testimony, sworn in? You can raise them up and push the bottom right-hand button.
There.
Okay. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony to give in this case now in hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. I do.
Yes, I
Would
do.
you state your name and addresses one at a time for the record?
Ellie Wertz, 3413 West Northtown Road, Normal, Illinois.
David Wirtz, 3413 West Northtown Road in Normal.
Would you like to make an opening statement?
The boss.
Yeah, that's fine. Whoever wants to talk.
Just a quick, so we moved out there around 11 years ago. David had a little bit of farming, but I had none, absolutely none, didn't even have a pet. So when I started searching to learn about farming, it was very difficult to find information where you could go to a farm and learn farming. They had classes, at colleges and stuff, but not for older people. And so I did find a class, but it was way, like 5 hours away, and I did go to that class and learned a lot. And then since then, I've been going to Wisconsin for my classes. They have week-long classes I go to learn. So I feel that there needs to be this niche in this community where you can go and learn these classes on a farm, where you can actually, pick the tomato, can the tomato, process it there, make your own soap, see what a well is. We have kids that come out that didn't know that a rooster doesn't lay an egg. I didn't know that either, to tell you the truth, before I got there. So I just think it's an exciting thing. We've had group homes come out to visit us, and groups just from our works come out. They're just excited about what we have to offer, and we've made a lot of mistakes out there. We planted corn next to ornamental corn, and then we had, don't do it, because it doesn't work. It all mixed up. So it's kind of nice to think that if you had someone that could mentor you and tell you, here's some things not to do. Fresh eggs. People don't know where fresh eggs come from. So it's just exciting to get people out there to be able to do these small classes. Although we said 45, that would be if there was a tour or some type of, if we brought in a speaker. I feel comfortable more between the 10 and 12 range for classes because you want hands-on. You want them to be able to walk away with the product. So that was our goal. And that's probably it, unless you guys have questions.
I'm just a laborer. I guess my background there is with the disaster recovery. Worked in that area, State Farm, for 15 years. And so that's helped me kind of understand and then be able to focus on a lot of the different aspects of the farm, definitely. I'm big into solar. I'm sustainable farming 100%. So I think we make a good team. If there's any questions, we're here.
Questions from the board?
Would you be teaching the classes or bringing in instructors?
Both. Tech classes, I'm currently going to herbal classes, so I'm trying to be certified as an herbalist. So anything like canning I can teach, obviously, that's pretty easy. But our son went to school, took classes for permaculture. I don't know much about that. So if we did have a need to bring in instructors, we would do that. I would not teach anything I didn't feel comfortable with. So we'd bring in that if we had a need for that. We're going to start extremely small, and see what, maybe have a class on dandelions. There's so many things you can do with dandelions. People are interested in that. And then move on, like canning and soap making and candle making. And just how to take care of chickens. People don't know if that's an easy thing to do or a hard thing to do. So, but I would like to bring in some instructors from different places too.
I don't really have a question, just more or less, I think it's great. I think in a lot of ways we've lost the truth in food and being able to be resourceful and learning techniques that have been lost through time and, sovereignty in our food system. I think it's a great venture you're looking into here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just reiterate that. Excuse me. It's been a long time since anybody made lye soap on the farm,
Yeah. And we make it with goat milk too, so it's kind
Okay, yep.
of, back to the thought of if in the middle of the winter you can't grow a tomato, you don't eat a tomato. You eat what you have, what you've processed through the winter, what you can, if you freeze dried or if you processed it, maybe you don't eat a tomato. I don't know. So just some of the sustainability of not having things right at your, and then like I said, the well, people have said, oh, people used to have wells. I go, people still have wells, so to be able to take the water and feed the animals. I've had a lot of kids come out. Some kids have been in a lot of trouble and the parents just want to get them out of the house and they'll come and do chores. And they just love it. Kids that are, wouldn't put their phone down suddenly are, shoveling stuff. I won't say. Or they're dragging hay out, or they're trying to, catch a chicken, or just finding the eggs. It's just really cool things that kids haven't experienced in a long time. So hope to have some of that, maybe some children classes where they can collect things and make projects.
Well, the alpacas will not come to me. I guess I'm the guy that shears them. So, but the kids, we've had teenagers come over. They'll sit out there with the alpacas right next to them,
And they come right to them.
and
It's
they
really
come right
cool.
to them, and they won't come to me. So, and we've had them as long as we've lived there, probably.
Yeah. So that's it.
Maybe you called him a llama.
Yeah, maybe.
I do have a question for staff. The thought behind, it seems counterintuitive, that it can't be any more than 2,500 from a residence district. rather than the 10,300, can you just say why that is?
This use was usually thought to be more for having things like wedding venues and ag tourism type things that were more intensive, where there would be a lot of traffic. And so it was thought that they needed to be closer to residences rather than out in the middle of the farm country.
I assume that was it. I thought I remembered that. Thank you.
Any questions from the board more? No? Staff?
No.
Would anyone in the audience have questions of this witness? Please come forward. Would anyone in the audience have testimony they want to talk about in this case? Please come forward. I don't see anybody. So would you like to make a closing statement?
I think that's it, just something we're passionate about. I hope.
We
We
hope
can
we
do
can
it.
help others and get more people engaged in what we're doing, so. But thank you for your time.
All right, thanks for coming. Yeah, push that button, please. So, do you want to go to the standards? I'll just call them off. Standard number 1,
Yes.
2,
Yes.
Yes.
3,
Yes.
4,
Yes.
5,
Yes.
6,
Yes.
and 7.
Matt.
Yes.
Okay, somebody want to make a motion?
I move that we approve case number SU-23-07.
I'll second that.
I have a motion by Turner, a second by Dean. Could we have a roll call vote?
Did you want to include the stipulation?
Yes.
Dear Wester,
Yes.
Bangert,
Yes.
Dean,
Yes.
Turner,
Yes.
Novosad,
Yes.
Finnegan.
Yes. Phil will tell you what you need to do now.
The final decision will go to the county board a week from this coming Thursday. And you can call our office after that, and then at that point, we'll send you a letter, and you'll need to come and get a change, what we call a change of use permit to allow this use.
So we're going to go to our next case. It's a continuation of case SU 2306. And where we're at with that is tonight we're going to do rebuttal by the applicant. So that's our next move if they want to come forward. Just as a reminder, you guys have all been sworn in, so we don't have to go through that again. And rebuttal is only 5 minutes. So kind of get your thoughts together if you can.
Also, we do have a new court reporter here tonight, so please state your name again.
Anytime you're ready.
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm sorry?
State your name.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mark Ditzworth.
Could you start with your name and address and spell it out for the court reporter?
Okay. Mark Ditzworth, Ditsworth, 1111 North State Route 115, Loda, Illinois. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the EPA Emergency Response and Remediation Plan. In a previous meeting, a gentleman gave the board the impression that the emergency plan is in fact an emergency situation plan or communication plan. The Emergency Response and Remediation Plan, pulled from the EPA website, is for reporting purposes only and follows the rules and regulations required to protect the USDW. It is not intended to handle or detail all emergency situations. The Emergency Response and Remediation Plan, per 40 Code of Federal Regulations 14694, as part of the EPA Class 6 permit application, the owner-operator must provide the director with an emergency and remedial response plan that describes the actions the owner-operator must take to address the movement of the injection or formation fluids that may cause an endangerment to the USDW during construction operation and post-injection site care periods. It was also noted that one phone number pointed out on page 7 was no longer viable. There is also a second number on page 16 which is viable and reaches the EPA UIC Director for Region 5. Notification to the UIC is to notify the UIC Director that there may be a potential leak and that measures are being taken as per the requirement of the 40 CFR standards. The UIC does not engage in emergency response actions, but requires notification that a system may be shut down to identify and characterize any potential release. The Emergency Response and Remediation Plan addresses the following scenarios: well integrity through monitoring of pressure and well containment, well monitoring equipment, monitoring for temperature, pressure, and annulus pressure, brine or CO2 leakage to the USDW, which is indicated by elevated concentrations in groundwater samples. Actions include remediation and alternate potable water supplies. Natural disaster, earthquake, tornado, or lightning strike would be normal disaster protocol. The Emergency Response and Remediation Plan under the Code of Federal Regulations, Title 40, Chapter I, Subchapter D, for the water programs addresses all the criteria the EPA requires. An additional emergency response plan for the complete OEE CCS system has been drafted. We are in the process of meeting with local agencies in Ford and McLean counties to solicit input for comprehensive emergency response protocols, including but not limited to unexpected CO2 release, public safety, emergency response team responsibilities, emergency response equipment, personnel, and resources needed. We met with the Ford County Emergency Management Agency Coordinator Terry Whiteberg and have received some helpful information. We were also able to meet with a larger group just after Thanksgiving. Due to an emergency call out, we were unable to meet with McLean County Emergency Management Agency Director Kathy Beck, but we plan to make that connection again soon. We have listened to concerns expressed about safety. Our culture of safety is driven from the top down in our organization. We've consistently adhered to regulatory procedures for our ethanol plant in compliance with the Illinois EPA regulations and reporting requirements for over 15 years. We have not had a chemical or hazmat release. We have received multiple hazmat awards for 5 years with no OSHA recordable. We have been involved with the local emergency planning agency in Ford County and plan to do so in the future. We annually receive high safety scores and in 2019 received the top safety award from Protect, a third party that completes triannual inspections of ethanol facilities. Many of the safety concerns pertain to the CO2 pipeline. Pipeline certification is up to the Illinois Commerce Commission. As for safety associated with CO2 injection wells, such wells have been operating for many years in various parts of the U.S. for enhanced oil and gas recovery. ADM has operated a CO2 injection and sequestration well site for over 10 years without an incident. Before closing, I would like to correct one statement from the meeting on November 7th. CO2 emissions reduction for the OES CCS project will capture and sequester 100% of the fermentation CO2, reducing the overall CO2 emissions for the ethanol facility by approximately 70%. Thank you for your time, and we ask for approval and a positive recommendation to the county board for approval of the special use permit.
Anybody else want to rebuttal? You're gonna have to pull that thing pretty close to you so we can hear you.
Thank you. My name is William Shea, S-H-A-Y, and my business address is 411 Hamilton Boulevard, Suite 1400, Peoria, 61602. I'm an attorney for the company, and I'd like to address two items in rebuttal. The first relates to a letter that I authored and sent to Assistant State's Attorney Taylor Williams on November 13th of this year, stating in summary that OES is not legally required to have an issued Class 6 well permit before the county issues a special permit for the well. And secondly, under the doctrine of federal preemption, by which the U.S. EPA is the only authority for regulation of Class 6 injection wells, a county does not have the authority to prohibit or regulate Class 6 CO2 sequestration wells per se. That November 13th letter will be provided as an additional applicant exhibit. And I just would like to briefly summarize again that letter. On May 11th of this year, the county board adopted a text amendment to the zoning ordinance that does include provisions applicable to CO2 sequestration. So the portion of that amendment that's relevant states the following. CO2 sequestration drilling operations shall be subject to the following standards, : a permit has been obtained from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency for a Class 6 injection well for carbon dioxide sequestration. Now, I want to emphasize that that provision says drilling operations shall be subject to having obtained a Class 6 well permit. It does not say that the issuance of a special use permit must be preceded by a Class 6 well permit, and that's significant. So it's clear and obvious, and I'll state again that if the county does see fit to issue a special use permit as requested to OES, it will not undertake any drilling or other construction operations for a well unless and until it receives a Class 6 well permit from the U.S. EPA. The other item addressed in my letter I'd like to comment on a little further has to do with federal preemption and the authority of this body concerning CO2 sequestration wells. Under the doctrine of federal preemption, which is based on U.S. Constitution, Article 6, Supremacy Clause, the U.S. EPA, under that clause, the U.S. EPA is the only authority for regulation of Class 6 injection wells. And therefore, state and local governments, including counties, do not have the authority to prohibit or regulate Class 6 CO2 sequestration wells per se. Now, I'm not saying you don't have the authority to apply standards to judge whether to issue a permit, but the US EPA's authority over safety regulations and safety factors, especially protecting US groundwater, underground drinking water supplies, is plenary. So as such, it is our position that the county may not deny the special use application on the basis of safety factors that are covered by the Class 6 well permit requirements. But of course, the county may otherwise apply standards for issuance set forth in its zoning ordinance in section 350-56. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Can't see anybody. Does anyone on the board have questions of the rebuttal?
I'm a little bit confused about the percentages that we referred to during the testimony. I thought there were only, and it may be my mistake, sequestering 30% of the carbon dioxide produced by the plant. And tonight you stated it was 70%. Can you help me understand that?
I misspoke on the percentage. Fermentation CO2 comprises 70% of our CO2 emissions. 30% of our CO2 emissions is from combustion, such as the boilers. So I misspoke on the percentage when I stated that. So I wanted to clear that up, that 70% of our CO2 emissions is from fermentation, and that's what we're sequestering. So we're not sequestering or gathering any CO2 from combustion. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Shea, in your opinion, or legal opinion, if you are not granted this special use permit and the EPA grants you a Class 6 well permit, the company, I should say, would the county be able to apply any of its stipulations? In other words, if we don't approve a special use permit now, and you're given a permit by the EPA, can we come back later and apply if we've denied you a special use permit? According to what you're saying here, we don't have a right to regulate whether or not you can do it.
Yeah, so not a black and white question or answer, unfortunately, but I'll try to respond to as best I can based on what I understand. I think the outcome would depend on the reasons why the county denied the permit. And if those reasons were ones that were, in our view, within the exclusive purview of the US EPA, then I would take the position that the denial of the permit would be subject to possible appeal because it was denied for reasons that the county wouldn't be authorized to do so. Again, that's not black and white. It's just based on my interpretation of the statute, the federal statute, and the regulations of the US EPA and the CO2 Class 6 well permit program, and my understanding of all the requirements, and then general principles of legal principles involving preemption, legal preemption. So if the denial stood, wasn't challenged, and or was challenged and stood, and then the US EPA subsequently issued the permit, the Class 6 well program, I would say the company would be back here, assuming that it was continuing with the project, would be back here again in front of this body seeking a special use permit. And I think after denial, I think there's a 1-year period before reapplication can be made. I think that's right, yeah. So I hope that's responsive.
It is, thank you.
Any other questions?
This
Got
is,
one.
this is a question for staff. That 1 year, it could be extended. Is that true or not true?
I don't quite understand your question.
The 1 year, they have to act within 1 year.
No, they don't have to act within 1 year. They can, if it's been turned down, they have to wait at least a year before they could reapply.
To us.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
That is if the county board makes a decision and turns it down. But if it's withdrawn, then that doesn't apply.
Staff have any questions about the rebuttal?
No.
Would anyone in the audience have questions of these witnesses about the rebuttal that they talked about tonight? Got one.
Margaret Kaylin. Do I need to do that? Keylin. 304 North Woodlawn Street, Downs, Illinois, 61736. This is for the first man who spoke. I didn't get your name. Did you submit your emergency response or your safety plan to the zoning board when you first applied for this special permit?
No, the emergency response and remedial plan that we're talking about was pulled from the EPA website, which was part of the application for the Class 6 permit. Our emergency response plan that encompasses the entire One Earth sequestration, carbon capture and sequestration project is in a draft form, and we're visiting with local Ford and McLean County agencies to get their input for what their concerns are, what their equipment requirements are, so that we can complete a good draft permit that we can work off of. And that's also a requirement of the ICC.
So at this time, you don't have an emergency safety plan?
We have a draft permit, but we're not required to have an emergency response plan at this time because we're not undergoing any construction or any injection. It's only required to have a complete plan before injection takes place or before construction of the pipeline takes place.
Thank you. And also, has ADM ever had any leaks connected to its sequestration wells?
That wasn't talked about tonight. We can't, just about the rebuttal
I
tonight.
believe someone said that ADM had never had any problems with leaks, one of the two gentlemen.
I did. ADM has operated CO2 sequestration wells and site for 10 years without incident.
No incidents.
I'm sorry,
There's been no leaks of any kind?
none that I'm aware of or have been reported.
Well, I feel I have read of that, and I'll look that up because it seems that there
Okay.
have been a few.
Ma'am,
Sorry.
questions only.
Okay, and then the other one is, and that would be for Mr. Shea. Did you state that the EPA is the only authority for regulating CO2 wells at this time?
No, I didn't say that.
Would there be other regulatory entities that you need to answer to at this time?
Yes, including this county.
Do you have to answer to PHMSA or to the Illinois State in any way for this at this time?
Well, I mean, there are various reporting requirements and approvals required for different facets of the total project. The wells being one, the compression facility, capture and compression facilities another, and the pipeline another. And each of those has its own separate requirements.
And so those are regulatory requirements for CO2 sequestration wells, state?
Well, wells and pipeline and capture and compression.
Okay, thank you.
Julia Fosdick, 14530 East 1300 North Road, Pontiac, Illinois. My question is for Mr. Shea. Okay, you pretty much said that EPA was the only, the agency that had authority, regulatory authority over a sequestration well. But there's aspects, EPA is over enforcing the Drinking Water Safety Act, I think it's called. But there's other aspects of a well, for instance, surface setback from residences that they don't address. So, but my question is about the pore space, surrounding the sequestration zone. The area of review encompasses over 100,000 acres, and that pore space would be impacted by increased pressure. And the EPA doesn't have any, as far as I can tell, do they have any regulatory authority over that at all?
Well, first of all, I'll answer part of it, and then Mr. Ditzworth will follow up. I want to emphasize that I did not say, and I did not mean to imply that only the U.S. EPA has authority, regulatory authority over CO2 sequestration wells. I thought I was careful to say that with respect to the safety matters that they cover in their program and their well permitting requirements, that's plenary authority and that's exclusive. And I will be readily acknowledge that there are other aspects of safety and other matters of concern, public concern involving these wells that go beyond just what the U.S. EPA has authority over.
So would you not agree that land rights issues for owners surrounding those sequestration wells are not clearly delineated, like who has authority over those, and that perhaps McLean County does have more authority over some of those issues if no one else statutorily has at this point?
Well, all I can say is that I'm not going to opine on the extent of the authority of the county or any other body. I mean, that's up to the county and on the advice of their council to determine. So all I can say is I can't say anything more legally about legal authority than what I have.
Okay.
You had a question about pore space too that I don't think was yet answered, that Mr. Ditzworth would be happy to address.
Okay.
You want to ask your question about the pore space again, please, if you would?
Well, my question about the pore space is that the pore space surrounding your sequestration zone, you would impact by affecting the pressure, because the pressure is affected all the way to the edge of the AOR. And those landowners, you do not have easements, I'm assuming, for that 100,000 acres of pore space. And so would you not acknowledge that somebody other than EPA could have authority over that, and that maybe that's a land rights issue that hasn't really been resolved in Illinois?
So the AOR is not directly related to the CO2 in the ground. Okay, the AOR is basically a pressure front. So you are correct. So based on the injection pressure going in that well, and at the last meeting, I believe we had testimony about, what the underground pressure is. So the AOR is identified by a pressure differential. So let's just assume we're going in at 1,500 PSI and the ground pressure at 6,400 feet is 1,200. So we have a 300 PSI differential. At the leading edge of that AOR, you're either going to be zero pressure or maybe just 30 PSI different than what that ground pressure is. The EPA uses that AOR to identify where the plume is going. That leading front of the AOR is just underground brine. It's moving, but you have a lower pressure. That's how they determine where that is moving to. The actual CO2 plume is done with other modeling and really only encompasses about 2.25 mile radius.
But are you then saying that area in that AOR you're not impacting or affecting at all? Because that seems contrary to the definition of the AOR, that you're increasing that pressure all the way to the extent of that AOR boundary.
That's correct, but it's very minimal pressure. At the well itself, you may have 200-300 PSI difference. At the edge boundary of the AOR, you may be zero pressure differential, or you may only be 30 PSI. But it would, to put it in an easy term, if you hook up a hose to any hose and run it out 200 feet, your pressure at the faucet may be 60 PSI. At the end of the 300, 400 feet, you may be only 15 PSI. It's just an indication of where that brine is moving, and so you can identify for areas of groundwater so that you can monitor the groundwater in those areas.
But do you not believe that that is an impact to that property?
No, I don't.
Because you have changed the pressure under that property on somebody's private land. And I think that's something that's not been addressed regulatorily here in Illinois at all.
I don't believe it's an impact whatsoever, no.
Okay.
John Carlson, C-A-R-L-S-O-N, 208 Kreitzer, K-R-E-I-T-Z-E-R, Bloomington. I was sworn in before. I do have a question. I just pulled up the emergency and remedial response plan on the US EPA website. I assume you have a copy of it with you?
I do.
Can you show me where on the 54 pages the word draft is used?
There is no draft on the ERRP. That is the emergency remedial response plan for the EPA requirements per 40 CFR 14694. The plan that is drafted is the actual emergency response plan that will cover the entire project, from wellhead to pipeline to CO2 possible or potential CO2 leaks, and how the emergency response teams will cover that. The emergency response and remedial plan is only for groundwater protection and covers the underground surface per the EPA.
Do you believe that US EPA, either Region 5 in Chicago or in DC, believe that the emergency response plan that is on their website for public view is not the actual emergency response plan as you just described?
I have had communications with the EPA Region 5 since we have submitted it. They have reviewed the emergency response plan, and it was determined administratively complete.
But that is a different plan than the one that is publicly available?
No, that is the plan that you're looking at right there.
Do you have the plan with you?
Emergency and remedial response plan, 40 CFR 14694.
Will you read the
Mr.
first?
Oh, hold on. Mr. Didsworth, your microphone was turned off. And also, could you please bring it closer to you? It's a little bit hard to hear you.
So yes, emergency and remedial response plan, 40 CFR 14694A.
Will you read the first sentence of the narrative?
I'm sorry,
The first sentence, will you read the first sentence of the narrative? Starting with this plan?
this plan is provided to meet the requirements of 40 CFR 14694.
I'm sorry, the second sentence as well.
The emergency and remedial response plan, ERRP, describes the actions the owner-operator, water sequestration, will take at the OES CO2 storage site in the unlikely event of an emergency within the project area of review during construction operation or post-injection site care.
But you're contending there's yet some other plan behind the curtain that will somehow supersede or supplement what you just read?
This plan talks about the area of review. Area of review, again, is the area 6,400 feet underground and how the brine is moving. It's to protect the USDW.
And what to do in case of emergency?
I'm sorry,
And what to do in case of emergency?
it's what to do if we suspect there's any groundwater contamination.
And what to do in case of an emergency that is not underground? You're under oath.
This does not cover that. This is
You're
per
under
the-
oath.
This is per the EPA. Okay. 14694. I have provided a copy
I'm
of
done with
40
questions, thank you.
CFR 14694.
Any other questions from the audience? Please come forward.
Dawn Dannenbring, 208 Kreitzer Avenue. Dannenbring. When you say that you have talked to the EPA about this plan and that they have affirmed it is administratively complete, could you please describe what administratively means?
Administratively complete, meaning it meets all their requirements.
Administratively or content?
Administratively complete.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Marty Seigel, 615 East Chestnut, Bloomington, Illinois. you're saying that the EPA is the final authority on the safety of the wells. Is this considered to be completed science or finished science, or is it what we believe right now? Or is it possible that the EPA is still deciding elements of safety and some of the decisions they make may be changed?
Who is the question for?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Me?
Sure.
Well, as a legal matter, I don't have an answer for you. If one of the other members up here can address that. I mean, you're asking about science and progress in technology and things like that I'm not addressing, so.
Ma'am, I don't believe any of these people have given rebuttal about the science. There may be someone else who gives some rebuttal about science that you may be able to ask your question to.
I just wondered if it was settled science, or if we might be looking at changes in what the EPA might be deciding as time goes on.
If you can answer the question, go ahead. If you can't, just tell her you can't answer the question.
Well, I mean, I hate to have questions go unanswered. We like to be responsive. I cannot answer that question, and I would say if somebody else down the line here can, you're welcome to. Abe?
I think I can I can speak a little bit to this, and I spoke a little bit to this in my testimony. I believe that science is always evolving.
We need to have you speak your name and address.
Sorry about that. Yeah, my name is Nick, N-I-C-K, Malkowitz, M-A-L-K-E-W-I-C-Z. Address is 2409 Bernice, B-E-R-N-I-E-C-E Drive, Champaign, Illinois, 61822.
We can't have him answer the question because he wasn't in the rebuttal. It has to be these two guys here. Sorry. And that was from our parliamentarian.
Yeah, apologize for not having an answer for you.
Okay, I just want to know, it seems like a very short time, 10 years, to be looking at this information, and it seems possible that scientists make different decisions.
Would there be any other questions? I don't see any. I think this time we can get rebuttal. Would anyone want to, I don't know how you phrase it, I guess, do a rebuttal of what we heard tonight, of the rebuttal that the applicants have done tonight? We can have rebuttal from the other side of what was introduced tonight, if we want to. If not, we're going to move on to something else. I don't see anything, so closing statements. So we're going to move on to closing statements. So anyone that gave testimony or any of this on this stuff, you know, over the last few days, couple weeks, can do a closing statement. So if you want to come forward, you know, we're not going to call your name out, just come up and we know if you give testimony or not.
Sorry, Dawn Dannenbring, 208 Kreitzer Avenue.
Ms. Dannenbring, before you begin, just a reminder to everyone, closing statements are limited to 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for the opportunity to give my closing statement this evening. During my earlier testimony, I testified that One Earth had not demonstrated that this project would not be detrimental to health, safety, or the welfare of the public. And there's nothing that I've heard in even tonight that that has assuaged my concerns. It's great that a local safety plan has been drafted. We still haven't seen it, and how can this board make a decision on something they haven't seen yet? Are there plans for evacuating the 1,083 school children or the 161 staff? While the proposed county ordinance that the board passed several weeks ago will increase setbacks to 1,500 feet, many of us have testified that this may not be enough for One Earth. As I previously reported, setbacks by time. If there's a blowout at One Earth's wellhead, a setback of 1,500 feet will buy residents at that distance 8 to 10 minutes of time. And that's if the connecting pipe is only 6 inches in diameter. My previous testimony on One Earth took 8 to 10 minutes. If there's a blowout, individuals within 1,500 feet would have the length of my previous testimony to evacuate. The clock is ticking. One Earth's order of notifications on page 7 of their safety plan requires contacting the control room first, the vice president of the company second, and the US EPA third. When do residents get notified? They don't even make the list in One Earth's protocol. How will residents even know they should evacuate? Remember, the clock is ticking. CO2 is odorless and invisible. By the time residents know, it will be too late. This is hubris on One Earth's part to come before you seeking a special use permit when none of these things have been addressed. Those of us testifying against the permit are concerned. We're not doing this for profit. We are concerned with the big picture, the health and the safety of our residents and the purity of our drinking water. And for the record, to date, sequestration projects have produced more CO2 than they've captured, so proponents aren't doing this for the planet. It's about money. I said that before, I'll say it again. It's always been about the money. We need you, the zoning board, to not engage in wishful thinking that everything will be all right. We need you to have the courage to not look away from what might happen if you approve this project. Vote on the sure thing, because that's the only way any geologist can promise you that the water will be safe forever. Please deny this permit. Thank you.
Thank you. No. I got out of order a little bit. You guys can do the closing statement first if you want to. So we'll go ahead and defer to you, then we'll go back to the audience. It's my mistake. I didn't read my script.
Okay, my name is Stephen Kelly, Kelly, and I live at 225 East, 700 North Road, Gibson City, Illinois, 60936. Okay, in closing tonight, on behalf of One Earth Sequestration, I ask for your consideration to approve our application for the special use permit as specified in the application and under the regulations of the McLean County zoning ordinance. We believe we have met the standards of the permit. These well sites are rural at sites determined following extensive analysis. One Earth Energy LLC is committed to meeting all of its legal requirements across local, state, and federal agencies. Each well site is subject to a federal permit requested from the United States Environmental Protection Agency under the Class 6 CO2 injection and sequestration program. The EPA scrutinizes these proposed sites, giving a comprehensive, rigorous review designed to protect the underground drinking water sources. Our testimony expressed our business concerns as the energy climate changes. Ethanol is a renewable, clean-burning oxygenate mixed with gasoline. That ethanol industry, our industry, supplies about 10% of the gasoline in the United States. Transitions are underway from fossil fuels to electric vehicles with a market goal of 50% of new vehicles by the year 2030. It's clear that some portion of that blending market will be displaced. The request, if granted, will allow for CO2 sequestration into a saline sandstone formation 6,400 feet beneath the surface, protected by more than 1,000 feet of rock. The result will be to reduce ethanol's carbon footprint. This reduction would qualify us as a low-carbon renewable fuel to be further defined for quality for sustainable aviation fuel, providing a clean-burning fuel now for the air travel business, and this will allow us to continue to serve our communities and our partners. We have letters of support from Illinois state representatives, U.S. senators, school superintendents, mayor, and local businessmen. It's imperative to engage all levels to move our project forward successfully. Reaching back into 2012, McLean County's board, Ford County Board, and the cities of Bloomington, Normal, and Gibson City worked together to extend the enterprise zone back to Gibson City so One Earth Energy would be put on a level playing field with others that had enterprise zone access in the state of Illinois. We hope to work together to bring this positive action on the special use permit. The CBA has the power to allow our company to pivot into the next logical phase of low carbon, clean, renewable energy and serve the community and continue to compete with other ethanol businesses. In closing, I ask for your affirmative vote to the County Board of Approval for the request of our special use permit.
Thank you. Well, that was right on 3 minutes, too. You must have practiced that. Anyone else in the audience want to give a closing statement? Now's your time.
Julia Fosdick. You got my other good information? Okay. Okay. This special use permit is of great concern to me in that none of the technical approvals have been granted and all of the land rights issues haven't been resolved. The pipeline design and siting hasn't been approved and the EPA hasn't approved the well for geological suitability and water protection. The major responsibility of the county is protecting the safety of its citizens. Absent regulatory agencies completing their analysis, if you approve this permit, are you taking on the responsibility of deciding that it is all technically satisfactory? That the benefits of this project outweigh all the risks? What about the 100,000 plus acres of land outside the sequestration zone, but in the area of review that are affected by this pressure increase in the saline? None of these landowners have given consent. And that's just an area of land use rights that's not been addressed on a statewide level or anything yet. I think, we just aren't ready to go forward with these projects. Are you giving consent for those people's land and taking the responsibility for that? And I don't believe that US EPA has any authority over any of those land rights issues. I think that there's too much unknown to grant this permit at this time. We need comprehensive Illinois laws and regulations relative to carbon sequestration and pipelines and capture. We need state laws clarifying subsurface land ownership rights. We need updated federal PHMSA regulations to determine how to build pipelines safely. There's only about a dozen years of experience worldwide with carbon sequestration. We don't know if it will stay where it is put, what will happen if it moves. We don't know how long it will really be until it is stable. We have no experience to predict what will happen to it in 20 years. We don't know anything, but here we are faced with the decision. There is no do-over if this turns out bad. Please don't approve the permit.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Marilee White, M-A-R-I-L-E-A, White. My address is 711 South Cottage Avenue, Normal, 61761. All this talk we've heard, all these little details we've talked about, my bottom line is that CO2 sequestration perpetuates the use of fossil fuels. If we care at all about our climate, we got to get off of fossil fuels. In general, it costs more money to do this kind of work with CO2 than it saves. My concerns are several. If we allow it, as One Earth is requesting, Illinois has the potential of becoming a dumping ground for other areas, other businesses, other states, people who know better and don't want it. I'm still not at all concerned that it is not a danger to our health and our safety of anybody who lives in central Illinois, and certainly in the area where these wells would be drilled, which is very close to my home. I'm concerned about damage to farmland, damage to the water supply. I live in Normal. Every ounce of water I drink comes from the Mahomet Aquifer. This is in danger also. Actually, I'm a rural nature lover, and I'm concerned that this proposal could do damage to all living things, animals, plants, everything. It also concerns me that the neighbors, the people that are going to be affected, don't know much about this project because they have not been told. My bottom line is, this is not a solution to climate change, and that needs to be our primary concern right now for ourselves, for our kids, our grandkids. We have to take care of the earth. I'm begging you to deny One Earth's request. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tyler Young, 40563 East, 1400 North, Saybrook, Illinois. So it's been stated that my family, my aunt and uncle, my parents, some of my best friends are all within proximity to the pipeline and the well, and we are all very much involved in the risk management plans that are being developed and have been developed and are established. So it's a little bit insulting to hear that it's not going to be taken care of because the ones that are actually affected are involved. Our project has been grassroots from the beginning because our neighbors are not far away. Requesting more information was common, and the facts were always investigated and presented. We worked through the unknown, and our community will continue to progress together way past the decommissioning of these wells. Now, as of today, the oil industry likes carbon capture exploration because we are poking holes in the ground. But as soon as we make a gallon of sustainable aviation fuel, they will be our enemy. And by then, they will be too late because the farmers' practices will be involved. And that's the debate I'm ready for. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Joyce K. One Earth does not have a local adequate current safety plan. Sequestration of CO2 is not the solution to improving our environment. It prolongs the use of fossil fuels. We do not want to be the experimental dumping ground. We do not know what the hazardous consequences are of sequestration. Money could be better spent on solar and wind. What happens when the Mahomet Aquifer is polluted and 850,000 people lose their current water source? They do not have local adequate current safety plan in place. We only have One Earth. Please deny the permit. Too much is unknown. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Go ahead.
do my name you need? Margaret Keylin, Keylin. Okay. At this time, One Earth is not ready to ask for a special permit to locate CO2 sequestration wells in McLean County. While One Earth has made some movement toward meeting the county zoning CO2 qualifications and standards, good intentions should not be interpreted as actually fulfilling their obligations to the county and following its rules when asking for a special permit. We learned One Earth can ask for a special permit without even having obtained a Class 6 well permit from the EPA. We learned no safety plan was submitted to the zoning board. A copy of that plan submitted to the EPA was obtained by the public, and it was vague in terms of who would provide and pay for vital training and equipment for first responders over the life of the project. One emergency phone number they listed was a recorded voice asking for caller name and phone number, only promising a return call when the office was open. We learned that schools are located in the area and school children could be in harm's way if a leak occurred. Considering the rapid movement of CO2 leak, the unique problems in containing it, and the life-threatening nature of CO2 exposure, this document showed little care for the health and safety of county residents. Since no safety plan has been submitted to the zoning board, it would be impossible to assess Standard A, which says the proposed special use will not be detrimental to or endanger the health, safety, morals, comfort, or welfare of the public. We learned no 100% guarantees could be given that the Mahomet Aquifer would never be contaminated by these wells. When it comes to our drinking water source, the public needs 100% guarantees. We learned that little is known about the direction or extent of movement of the underground CO2 plume over the life of the project, which, in concert with possible groundwater contamination, concerned farmers about farming viability and probable loss of value for their land. We learned sequestration companies are in the business of creating hazardous waste dumps for CO2, a byproduct of ethanol, fertilizer, and cement plants, to name a few. We learned One Earth's request for a special use permit from McLean County to allow hazardous waste dumps in an agricultural district does not meet the zoning standard that says it must conform with the intent of that district. At present, other than EPA regulations protecting only the underground water sources, there are no federal or state CO2 pipeline and sequestration regulations in place to protect the public and the environment. Our zoning rules are all we have right now. Should One Earth be permitted to drill these wells after showing little regard for our rules? We cannot take these risks of irreversible harm to our people and environment for the sake of supporting the bottom line of a private for-profit business that instead of actually lowering our creation of CO2, makes increasing new CO2 viable. One Earth will not be the last company to seek permits for these wells drilled through several layers of our cap rock in McLean County. I urge the zoning board to deny One Earth a special use permit for CO2 sequestration wells in McLean County, and to ask the county board to declare a moratorium on CO2 wells and pipelines until federal, state, and further county rules regulating this hazardous waste industry are in place. Thank you for listening and allowing our questions.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Susan Adams, ADAMS. I want to urge you to protect the Mahomet Aquifer, protect the communities, the cities, the private wells it serves. These the current plan has 3 wells that fall in the Mahomet Sole Source Aquifer Protection Review Area. Some of this area provides water recharge to the Mahomet Aquifer. If you think there is little to be concerned about, let me share that problems are already happening, and I will leave this with you. A couple that lives in Decatur is now suing ADM for injecting CO2 below their land. This is based on documentation they were able to present that shows that CO2 is drifting under their land where they were not involved in any of this process. I ask you to keep the aquifer in mind as you make your decision, and that problems created in the aquifer take years to resolve and often have major impacts. Please be remembered for protecting our water and the people that use it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Evidence cannot be entered during closing statements.
Ready? Don Carlson, Carlson, and I'm also the Executive Director of Illinois People's Action that has turned out a lot of people to these hearings. The emergency response plan that was filed with the EPA is the emergency plan. It simply is. Our organization met with EPA and we asked them, and they said, here's the website, go here. There was no other draft, something new coming down the road. The incomplete emergency response plan filed by One Earth clearly endangers the health and safety of the public, and their special use permit has to be denied based on that. I testified earlier about One Earth's CO2 drilling in the proximity of the Mahomet Aquifer and watersheds and the aquifer recharging areas. One Earth's EPA permit application with the EPA of February 2023 states, quote, "The project review area for the Mahomet sole source aquifer consists of the designated sole source area, plus 3 adjacent watersheds that provide recharge to the Mahomet aquifer system." In my cross-examination of the company, they admitted their well sites were within the Mahomet sole source aquifer project review area. I recently spoke with Alec Mali, attorney for US EPA, who confirmed this as well. Given the proximity to the aquifer and the threat posed by 400,000 tons of CO2 that would be dumped every year, you must deny as this threatens the welfare of the public. You are empowered to deny this permit based on your own rules. As you know, one of the 7 standards states, the proposed special use will not be detrimental to or endanger the health, safety, morals, comfort, or welfare of the public, end quote. This same ZBA protected the aquifer in 2014 by denying a special use permit for Menard Run Oil Company. We pray you make the same wise decision again tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Brent Lage, Lage, 18486 North, 4100 East Road in Anchor, 61720. After my testimony, I was asked about the financial viability of my farm if this project was implemented. I was caught off guard somewhat by that question because for me, it was never about the financial status of my farm. My concerns and thoughts have always been about the viability of the farmland, our drinking water supplies, and the farming community as a whole. My intentions as a caretaker of the land have always been to leave it better for the next generation. Bills have been proposed at the state legislature but have not yet been made law to determine ownership rights of pore space under landowners' property, as well as the use of eminent domain in regards to CO2 projects. Many people live out here but do not own the farmland around them, and there is no control over where the CO2 will go. Thought must also be given to property values for those within this proposed project and how their home and land values may be impacted. As I mentioned in testimony, there are many people living within or who own land within this proposed project who knew very little about any of the project details. I've taken it upon myself to talk to many neighbors and landowners in the proposed CO2 plume, all of whom had not seen any of the maps regarding this proposed project, and the overwhelming sentiment has been against this proposal. It is as if the applicants wanted the project to fly under the radar as low as possible so as to not upset the apple cart. The only reason this project is financially viable is because of federal dollars attached to carbon sequestration. It has been said without this CO2 project, the financial future of One Earth Energy ethanol plant is in jeopardy. And I say to that, if it takes this kind of projects with the risk of CO2 underground storage and high-pressure pipelines and massive amounts of federal tax dollars to keep the ethanol plant open, then maybe it's time to let it close and let us as farmers and innovators find a use for our crops. This project is guaranteed to put the money into the hands of those that own One Earth sequestration and not necessarily into the local economy or those living within the proposed project area. The McLean County Special Use Permitting Ordinance gives the county the right to say no to projects in an effort to protect the public interest, specifically as it relates to health, safety, and the welfare of the community, and I urge you to use that right.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Sally Lasser, Lasser. This project has great potential to compromise my health and safety, as well as nearby communities. It may also affect my ability for lending and insurance, as I described in my recent testimony. I have deep concern regarding my property values. No one has offered me remedies for these issues. This is not the only use for CO2, and I encourage investigating safer options. I believe this science to be premature. This is not the only CO2 solution or climate change solution available, and I encourage a safer alternative. You asked for proof of the conversation I had with my insurance agent. I heard what you said, but this was based on my testimony from November 14th. Am I allowed to submit that?
I'll ask our parliamentarian if we can take it or not. I don't know.
Well, evidence cannot be submitted during closing statements, but the chairman did ask for this, so I hand it up here and I'll decide later, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you. I get her in trouble all the time. Anyone else?
May I give?
Rodney Landau, Landau, 17194 North, 4000 East Road, Anchor. I'm a lifelong farmer and resident of Anchor Township, and I would ask this board for a yes vote. I have the confidence in One Earth that they're going to follow all the rules, regulations, and it will be a safe well. Please vote yes.
Thank you. Anyone else? Can you get this? Can you give a closing statement?
Nick Malkowitz, Malkewicz. Do you need an address? 2409 Bernice, Berniece Drive, Champaign, Illinois. I'd like to thank the McLean County Zoning Board of Appeals for this opportunity to present a closing statement. As stated in my earlier testimony, I'm the president of Progeo Corporation, a company which I founded to accelerate the energy transition using subsurface resources. We are a group of technical experts, primarily with upstream oil and gas experience, working to leverage the near century.
Could you talk slower, please?
Yeah, sorry. Working to leverage the near century of experience gained in that field towards safely accelerating a low-cost, low-carbon energy future. We believe that the energy transition is just that, a transition, and that CO2 storage, among other technologies, has an important part to play in meeting climate and emissions objectives set by scientific consensus. CO2 storage as a part of ethanol production is one aspect of this as we work globally, domestically, regionally, in our communities, and personally towards a low-cost, low-carbon, energy-secure future. We are working with One Earth Sequestration to support various aspects of their CO2 storage project development. Trapping CO2 underground is not new. Like naturally occurring oil and gas deposits, CO2 is naturally present underground throughout the world and has been trapped there for tens to hundreds of millions of years. Upstream oil and gas projects have been conducting enhanced oil recovery projects in which CO2 is safely injected to enhance oil hydrocarbon extraction since the 1970s. Domestically and globally, CO2 projects have been safely developed since the mid-90s. When developing a CO2 storage project, we carefully plan and systematically engineer all elements of the subsurface, which include meticulously designing and selecting construction materials to be compatible with injected and subsurface fluids, and designing for redundancy in case of individual component failures. We engage a variety of highly specialized geotechnical disciplines to perform characterization, modeling, and simulation to assure the subsurface systems will safely and securely store the CO2. We align our work with industry best practices, which are synthesized under the US EPA UIC Class 6 standards. As scientists, engineers, and technical experts, we hold ourselves and our work standard to our personal and professional ethics. At ProGeo, these include absolute dedication to the protection of health, safety, and the environment, and a commitment to the disciplined stewardship of resources. We have been working on this project with One Earth since 2019 and believe their conduct has demonstrated an alignment to these values. Based on the technical information we have, we believe this site is capable of permanent CO2 storage and recommend the McLean County ZBA approve this special use permit. Thank you.
Thank you.
John Sedbrook, JOHN-SEDBROOK, 7 Kenyon, KENYON Court, Bloomington, Illinois. So I urge the board to make the decision based on sound science and engineering and not on mischaracterizations and what could be considered fear-mongering. So there was a number of statements that were made that were mischaracterizations and inaccurate. I'll address a few of those. You've not had any scientists or engineers come up here and saying that this is a risky, dangerous undertaking. None. And in fact, you've heard engineers and scientists, Dr. Whitaker, say that there's a lot of science has gone into it. This isn't just something people are making up. There's a lot of science, decades, even longer behind this. Okay, so this, and I've testified before that carbon sequestration and storage is considered a solution for dealing with climate change. This is not adding to the problem. It's essential. That's one point. Another point, this is not about greed. This is about coming up with solutions for sustainable existence, which we are not doing right now. We haven't been doing. 35 years ago, a person from NASA went in front of Congress, said that climate change is happening because of our actions, and this isn't something that's happening overnight. So how will this positively impact McLean County? So there are over 1,400 farms in McLean County. They're mostly family-owned and operated, 95%. So that's 80% of the county is comprised of farmland. And so this is a huge part of the economy and a huge number of people being impacted by this, okay? And so right now we're using corn for ethanol and food and feed, and ethanol for mixing with gasoline, but that's not going to be sustainable. We've got to change what we're doing. We have to be sequestering carbon, having lower carbon footprint in what we do. And so this article that just came out of Reuters, so it has quotes from the Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, and the title is U.S. Ethanol Industry Needs Carbon Capture to Feed Aviation Fuel Market. So quotes from the Ag Secretary, right? You've heard from me, you've heard from One Earth the importance of lowering the carbon footprint of fuels. So for folks in the Midwest, this is a quote unquote from Secretary Vilsack. for folks in the Midwest, if they're interested in taking advantage of a biofuel renaissance and expansion with sustainable aviation fuel, they are going to have some way of dealing with the issue of carbon capture and storage. So quote unquote. And in order to have the ethanol used for aviation fuel, it has to be below 50% carbon footprint compared to fossil fuel. So this needs to be done, and it's safe based on science and engineers.
Thank you. Anyone else? Honestly, I don't see anybody else, so we're going to move on to the next thing. And I've asked for the Assistant State's Attorney to come up and talk to us tonight.
Mr. Chairman, now that this portion of the hearing is closed, I'd like to request a 10-minute recess if that
Okay.
pleases you.
Okay. We're going to have a 10-minute recess. We're going to come back to order. I'd say at this time, we got a few questions. I think the board is kind of in limbo land with a few things. And so I asked Mr. Trevor Sayer to come and talk to us tonight and try and clear a few things up with us. So can we just answer the questions?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just kind of as a general preface, I haven't been here for all the testimony, so I'm not answering any questions specifically as to this application or how the ZBA should rule on this application or apply ordinance and statute to this application, just to answer questions kind of about authority and process generally. So, but yes, I'm happy to answer questions.
So do I need to swear you in?
No, I'm not going to be providing any testimony, only answering questions in my capacity as counsel to ZBA. So I don't believe that a swearing in is necessary. But I'll defer to Ms. Williams, who has done an admirable job serving as your parliamentarian.
You're my boss, so I'll defer to you.
All right, first question. If the county turns down the special use for the CO2 sequestering wells, can the U.S. EPA still issue a permit for the construction of that well?
Yes. So the U.S. EPA is going to make their determination as to whether or not they're going to issue a well based on their own criteria, based on the Safe Drinking Water Act and the regulations that they've imposed from that statute. They're not going to look at the many other layers of government that may have an authority over a certain aspect of the project.
Is that clear for everybody? All right. If the county turns down the special use for the CO2 sequestering well, can the county impose zoning restrictions on the CO2 well that is issued the permit construction by the U.S. EPA after they've done it? Can we put restrictions on it?
So my understanding of the question is, if there's a denial from ZBA and the county board, can the county then impose restrictions if the permit was granted by U.S. EPA and the project goes forward? And my understanding of that is no, the county would have no say. The U.S. EPA is going to make their determination, just again, kind of like I answered your first question, based on their own criteria. Really, the county's opportunity to use its own powers, I guess, would be through zoning, like as it applies to this project. The county could provide feedback to the EPA through the EPA's permitting process or to the ICC when the applicant goes for permits on the pipelines. But in terms of the county's authorities, powers, then I think zoning is pretty much the only authority available.
Well,
Does that answer the question?
not entirely.
Okay.
Well, so are you saying that if we, if the county turns down a special use permit for a CO2 sequestration well now, and the EPA comes back, US or Illinois or whatever EPA has jurisdiction, comes back and grants the permit, that we have no standing to impose zoning restrictions? They can't, they wouldn't come back to us and say, and reapply for a special use permit?
I see. So I don't know what they would do what the applicant would do in that circumstance. I agree with what Mr. Shea said earlier. Yes, they could reapply.
Do we have the right to still require them to get a special use permit and impose our zoning regulations?
Oh, I think I understand the question better now. And yes, the need for the special use permit does exist independently from the EPA. So as long as the county's ordinance is a valid exercise of zoning authority, and I have every right, or every reason to believe that it is, then if, let's say, the US EPA were to grant the applicant a permit and they tried to build the well without a special use permit, well, then, we might have to seek a court remedy or, something like that to impose the county's ordinance. So I guess in that way, the county zoning jurisdiction and authority does still exist. My first answer was based on the US EPA isn't going to build in our, the requirements of our county ordinance into their permit. So I think I misunderstood.
But we still would have standing even either before the US EPA granted a permit or after. We still have the right to control our portion of the zoning.
Yes.
But to clarify, that would only be on setbacks and safety and stuff like this. It wouldn't be anything to do with the well if it was approved. We couldn't turn the well down.
Well, I believe that, could you re-ask your question?
Well, if the EPA approves it, say we turn it down, the EPA approves it, and then the only thing, that we can't not let them have it, but they would have to live within our restrictions.
Assuming that the applicant came back and reapplied, then they could ask for a permit again. The county wouldn't be obligated to give One Earth a permit, a special use permit, just because the EPA issues a permit. I mean, the county can make its determination based on separate factors. The US EPA is regulating under the Safe Drinking Water Act. And really, the scope of their review of the application is about the drinking water involved, the underground drinking water sources. The reason that the remedial plan that's filed with the EPA really only discusses underground incidents is because that's what their review is going to look at. I think we heard testimony about plans to develop a more comprehensive emergency response plan, and I think that sort of emergency response, first responders responding to safety needs on the streets are more where the county's zoning authority lies.
I don't know if I'm still clear on this, and I don't think we've answered the question, because we can't, if the EPA says yes, we can't say no to the well. Is that right?
The county could say no to yes, the county could say no to that. It's for zoning reasons, not if the county can't say no because it's trying to protect the aquifer. I don't see any authority for that. But if the county is saying, no, this proposed well is too close to a school or too close to some of the different reasons that this board typically zones, or it doesn't conform to the existing uses around the proposed well. If for those reasons the county says no, then that no is valid independent of the EPA.
Well, just to follow up on that, I mean, we have these 7 standards that you are familiar with. I mean, we go through every zoning case and say, are these standards met? And one of the standards is, does it impact the health and safety of citizens? And if we truly feel as a zoning board that the health and safety of citizens are impacted negatively, then we have every right to deny this special use permit. Is that, am I interpreting what you're saying correctly?
Yes, with conditions. That grant of power about zoning for the protection of for the safety of the county's, residents, is a very broad and vague grant of power, and courts have interpreted that in different situations. And a county can't exercise authority that through zoning that it wouldn't otherwise have. That's really kind of like a state area. So an example that I think I'd used in my opinion was pesticides. That previously the state had a regulatory regime for pesticides, and different municipalities wanted to pass different sets of laws on their own about what kind of pesticides they would ban, and that through zoning, because they argued that was for the safety of their citizens, and courts struck that down and said, well, counties or municipalities don't have any authority to zone or to regulate pesticides. So you can't regulate pesticides through zoning just because it affects health and safety. And protection of the aquifer falls under the same kind of rationale here, in that, yes, protecting the sources of drinking water do ultimately go to health and safety of the public, but that is not an area in which the state has given the county any authority to regulate. It's really only kind of that more traditional police power of safety that I was discussing previously.
Is everybody clear on that? Ruth is not.
Well, I'm clear enough for the moment, but I have some other questions.
Well, now's the time to ask it.
Okay. We approved this text amendment back in May. And, in retrospect, I don't know, you can interpret it a couple of different ways. But based on your opinion, do you feel like this is a good text amendment, or should it be amended? And where I'm going with this is even the reference to the applicant and owner shall work with the local fire and department and emergency management agency to develop and fund an emergency response plan. Well, what happens if there's no agreement, or what happens if they can't work together, or does this have to be done before we grant a special use permit, or just kind of procedurally, how's this going to work?
Well, right now the board needs to apply the ordinance that exists as it existed when the applicant applied, which I believe is the version that was passed in May. Yes, and I don't really have an opinion on whether it is a good or bad ordinance. It's just kind of the ordinance that we have. I don't think it's the provision that they must have the Class 6 EPA permit is really unnecessary and doesn't really do very much from my perspective, because whether or not the county requires that, if they don't have that permit, the US EPA isn't going to let them operate, right? So that it just doesn't seem to have a lot of teeth in that regard, but there's still the 7 standards that apply to every case, and I think that that provision, is sort of a backstop to ensure that the county's special use permit will only issue if the US EPA does eventually issue a permit.
And one more little question. Does Illinois have any, I have not kept up with this, but is there any movement toward establishing primacy for the Illinois EPA rather than the US EPA?
Not to my knowledge. I've not seen an application submitted to the EPA for primacy for Illinois. I know a few states do have pending primacy applications. There have been at least one state that attempted to ban Class 6 wells at the state level, And I think that has raised different questions about the federal and state authority. But this is really kind of just more of a question of county authority and what authority the county has.
I think you just answered this one. We're going to move on to the next one. Can the county approve a special use for CO2 sequestering wells with a condition that the construction cannot begin until a permit is obtained from the U.S. EPA for that well?
Yes, I think that they can make that requirement, but even without that condition, it wouldn't be built until the US EPA issues a permit.
Yeah. Everybody clear on that? If the county approves a special use for the CO2 before the US EPA issues a construction permit for the well, can the county attach stipulations such as those included in the text, in the approved text amendment?
Yes, as I stated before, I didn't hear all the testimony. So if the board or the county's decision were challenged, if the board were to attach a stipulation that wasn't supported by the evidence, then that could be a basis to invalidate a particular stipulation. But if the board did find there was evidence to attach the same stipulations that exist in the proposed text amendment, the board could impose those.
Everybody okay with that? Can the county hold up the issuance of a construction permit for a CO2 sequestration well by the EPA, US EPA until a special use permit is obtained by the county?
So it's pretty much the same as my answer to the first question in that no, the county cannot stop the issuance of a permit from the EPA, but the county could assert its legal authority to stop construction if there wasn't a special use permit due to zoning.
Everybody okay with that? Last one I've got, I think there other board members have other questions. Can the county attach a stipulation that the CO2 sequestration well cannot be located above an aquifer?
So I want to be careful on this one, on this question, because Illinois courts haven't yet addressed whether the county's zoning powers include the authority to regulate the siting of a CO2 sequestration well to protect an aquifer. The General Assembly hasn't conferred to counties any authority to regulate for the protection of groundwater resources, so I don't see how, with the existing law, the county could attach a stipulation that the CO2 well couldn't be located above an aquifer. But that's just my understanding of the law as it exists, and courts may ultimately come down with a different view.
That was all the questions I had. I think maybe there's some other questions there if you don't mind answering them.
I'll certainly try.
We heard, did the state of Illinois have clear laws before the county started granting permits for windmills? Clear laws surrounding windmills? You know,
So I wasn't here for the beginning of the windmill process. And my understanding is that the laws weren't very well defined at this time. And Mr. Dick may actually be able to provide better information than me in this regard. But that no, the county was kind of acting without very much statutory guidance from the statewide level and applying things like financial assurances kind of on an ad hoc or case-by-case basis. And then eventually certain AMA requirements were passed and they kind of provided uniformity throughout the state. I think there are at least two different pending bills before the General Assembly that take different regulatory approaches to CO2 sequestration wells, but neither have become law. So really, I think we're left without much guidance at this time.
I don't know if any of this addresses or needs to, but it's just a question I would have, like when it comes to property rights and mineral rights and, above ground, below ground, typically, there would be a respect to, if somebody doesn't want something dumped on their land, there's laws in place for that. There would be protections for that. If a landowner that is close to a well does not want, you got mineral rights, and then this is considered a pollution product that they don't want pumped below their ground. Do these people have any rights, or is there any concern there that we should be looking at? I don't know how it would, factor into our 7 standards here, but is there any thought to that you could shed some light on?
I don't have a great answer to that. I don't know mineral rights well enough to give you an answer off the top of my head. But I don't really see that as factoring into the board's decision. I think I don't see how that really fits the factors. And if that person does have a legal claim, that would be a private claim against their adjacent landowner, the landowner or the company, or whatever the case might be. That's kind of a private claim between those parties. Not and I'm not saying it's not the county's problem. It's just that that's not what the ZBA is determining in whether it making its decision here.
I'd like to go back and revisit number 5. Trevor indicated that can the county hold up issuance of a construction permit for a CO2 sequestration well by the USPA until a special use permit is obtained from the county? And the first part of that answer was no. We don't have the authority to stop that. Am I?
Correct. We do not have the authority to stop the US EPA's permitting process. That is independent, separate track.
But then the second part of that, after you said that, you said, yes, we had the authority to stop. We had the authority to to stop the construction because they haven't fulfilled their zoning, because they don't have a permit from us.
Correct.
Okay.
So the difference is we can't influence the EPA permitting process, but we can delay construction. And we have the authority, if we truly feel that this is not in the public interest, we can delay or withhold a special use permit.
Yes, the ZBA can withhold the permit separate from the US EPA's decision. Yes.
And because we have the language in our zoning code already, they would not be able to start construction of a sequestration well until they got a special use permit from us.
That's correct.
Okay. But I think the construction part of it was what was
Yeah.
catching me up. Thank you.
You're welcome.
On that same vein, though, I think that you said there would have to be a valid reason to not issue the permit or the special use. Have to be a valid reason from us.
Correct.
Otherwise, it wouldn't hold up in court.
Correct.
And would you consider the valid reason to be that well, we're in kind of a catch-22 then, because they don't have their permit from the US EPA. I mean, here's where the text amendment wasn't precise enough, possibly, because it says drilling operations cannot start without a special use permit.
But you can, the board could still have safety concerns that are unrelated to the EPA's permitting process. There can still be unanswered or if you feel that the applicant hasn't met their burden on health and safety, I mean, it has the same kind of meaning as it would for any other applicant. We can't apply a more stringent, application of that term to this applicant than we would others, but it does have the same impact, I guess. So you could still say no, that you still have discretion in that realm.
But in our zoning text amendment, our ordinance, we spell out what we designed as safety. Okay, so this is the one before, I'm looking at the new one now.
Well, that's the question, but I think he already answered it. We can't, well, it hasn't been approved by the county board anyway. The new ordinance that we've gone through has no effect on this case.
Yes, it does.
No.
The one that we passed in May.
The one in May, but not
Yep,
the
yep.
one that we've just.
Not the one
worked
I'm
through.
looking at right here.
The new, the addition to the,
I'm sorry, yeah, sorry, right.
Okay, yep, thank you.
and we can't hold them to those standards. Is that what you told us?
Well, what I said was that they're not applying under that set of standards, but if the committee, for example, wanted to impose a 1,500-foot setback, the committee, based on the evidence that was received, if the committee wanted to do that, the committee could still make that decision.
We could add it as a stipulation?
Exactly.
Without the county board approving it?
No,
See, the
Just
county
like-
board hadn't approved what we did.
We can
until-
add it as an individual stipulation for this case.
And we're okay to do that?
yes.
Okay. I'm glad you answered that because you said, I took it originally that you said we couldn't use that at all.
It's kind of confusing and I'm sorry if I'm not being very clear in my answers.
No.
They're fairly complicated questions and maybe I'm offering too many different conditions, but
That's why we got you here, because we're confused. Or I'm confused. I won't talk about anybody else, but of what we can and can't do.
Well, that
So-
brought a lot of light to me that if we can't add them, we can add them. So, okay, thank you.
So my understanding is this is no different than any other case, that we can add stipulations just like we've always been able to do, providing that the evidence presented substantiates that, except where the EPA is concerned in the permit, where the safety of water is concerned.
I agree, yes.
Okay. Have we any other questions? Because if we close it with this, we're going to be on our own. So I want everybody to know, or, if you have something that's just not clear, now's the time.
Do we have any answer on concerns about property rights and insuring properties? We have nothing to go on.
I don't have anything to add in that regard, no. Ms. Williams, do you have anything?
Well, the only thing that I have to add is that I cannot admit Miss Lasser's exhibit because it was submitted during closing statements, and that's improper. And I know she's no longer here in the audience, but I'll still say it anyway. It's unfortunate if she didn't understand what we had said, but she was here during the other days, and she could have submitted it at another time. So I don't personally have anything to add, and also her documents will not be admitted into evidence.
I'm going to ask one more question though. You know, if we're not clear on the insurance or that particular, you know, what the rights are, could we ask another expert to come and talk about that and continue the meeting for one more, for just one thing, and ask for an expert to come and talk to us about it so we know?
I'm going to defer on that question to Ms. Williams again, because I'm not as familiar with the rules and procedures of this board as I am with the county board. For a typical administrative hearing, this is kind of a quasi-judicial proceeding, we've had the parties present evidence. We've had a close of evidence. I'm not sure if this board's rules allow for an individual member to make a motion to reopen evidence and call witnesses on its own motion, essentially, without a party seeking to introduce that testimony. So those are just questions that I'm not prepared to answer, and I'm sorry.
I was under the impression that we could open it up for one question, for one particular thing, but both sides would have a chance to cross-examine, but we wouldn't be opening up the hearing for everything again. It would just be one for one subject. But I'm not an expert.
Mr. Chairman, my only thought on that, and I could be wrong, that we would ask an expert to come in here and they would be giving us their opinion. It wouldn't be illegal, or it would just be an opinion.
That's why you got to ask for the right expert. So it's not an opinion. And if we can't do that, it doesn't do us any good.
Right, that's what I'm.
So I don't know who this is, but.
Mr. Chairman, I will look into that, but I'm going to need a minute, please. I do not want a half an hour.
Well, while we're waiting on that, I have sort of a parallel question. I mean, we touched on very peripherally the whole issue of financial assurance and who's liable and.
Is it to Trevor? I mean,
Well, yeah.
because
So who's liable and the whole financial assurance piece of this? And where I'm going is when we deliberated about the windmills, we had a lot of information and that was pretty well spelled out. But in this case, we're kind of asked to, my assumption or my interpretation of the testimony was that it was part of the EPA permitting process, that there would be a financial assurance, whether it be a irrevocable letter of credit or whatever. So is that something that I guess I sense that we probably need a little bit more information about what is in that EPA process. And is there some way that we could get assurance that that piece is in there, is being looked at and considered by the EPA? You understand my question?
I do know that that is a component of the EPA review, is that the financial assurance component, must be, it is like a regulatory, part that must be submitted and approved by EPA. I don't know that we have any say over what the contents of that are. I think a big difference from windmills, in my opinion, are the impact that the footprint on the planned in footprint, of the structures. What's all the material required to build a wind tower, I think is more significant than the footprint of a well, from what I've seen of different plans. But really, you're kind of getting into your role is, you're asking me questions that kind of go more toward your role as a fact finder than my role as a legal advisor, I think.
Okay, so I have an answer to your question. The general principles for the hearing rules state, there's two different rules. The first rule states, zoning board of appeals may ask a party or a witness to address a specific issue. And then the next rule right after that is, upon a properly approved motion by the zoning board of appeals, it may reopen the hearing and take new evidence and argument from the applicant, interested parties, or objectors, even if the hearing has proceeded past the evidentiary stage. So I think the answer to your question is yes. If you had a particular person that you wanted to address a specific issue, you could reopen the hearing and ask them to come and address that before the board.
So we would be entertaining something like asking the state insurance czar to come answer our question? Is that what we would?
And just to be clear, I'm not giving my opinion necessarily on whether you should do that or not. I'm just simply reading the rules.
No, I understand that. We're trying to think about whether this process is going to be fruitful or not, is what I'm laying out there.
Well, at the very least, could we make a motion to reopen the hearing to the extent that we could see the letter or the evidence that she provided tonight, that after in her closing statement?
I don't think the letter is hearsay because the person's not here. And so we can't consider it.
But the letters from her
But
insurance.
he's not here.
Oh, okay,
And I don't know who this person is. I haven't seen the letter.
okay.
But in past, well, we have not submitted anything like that into evidence because it has to be, the person has to come and testify in front of us. And I think that's the rule. I mean, if we could come up with a person that would come and talk to us, I think it would answer questions to us and the people in the audience that, we're following the rules. Because I'm not clear on it.
So we would have to make a motion for a continuance and then reach out to this individual that submitted that letter and ask that person to come back, or additional witnesses, expert witness?
I don't know if the person that submitted the letter is an expert or not. That's what, we don't know. So I think we need to have somebody independent. If that letter was submitted for this lady, it's a biased opinion because she asked this guy So in my thoughts, it's not, it has to be somebody independent of the whole process that we could come up with her. And I don't want to confuse this whole thing, but I guess I don't want to miss something either.
I would argue that, through the course of our making decisions and deciding we have to look at the evidence before us and the credibility of the evidence before us. And we had one person bring that up, and we had many people who lived in that area, are familiar, have been in the middle of this decision for quite a while. And we had exactly one person with nothing to back that up. And in the course of our deliberations, we've had this come up before, these types of situations come up before. And we need to, I feel it's without an expert, it's within our purview to make a decision on that. But that's just mine.
And as far as the financial surety portion of it, I think that's back on the US EPA. Can we set that aside and, okay, thanks.
So at this point, I mean, if we got our questions answered and we want to move on, is that what we're saying?
I think I'm ready for the question.
For what?
For the question, for going through the standards and. The whole board may not be.
I was going to say, you always like to jump right into the standards.
We're not going to jump to the standards. I guess all I want to know is if we can let Trevor go.
I'm fine letting Trevor go. And I appreciate very much his input.
Right. We appreciate you coming. You did a lot of good, and I think not just for us, I mean, for the audience to hear it too. I think that's important, You asked us if we wanted to do this in closed session, and I said, no. We want everybody to hear what we hear.
I don't often advise clients in public meetings, but I will, abide by your request, Mr. Chairman.
We thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, at this point, the public hearing is closed and we can deliberate on this issue.
So one thing I took away from Trevor is that we could, that our new standards, use standards is 350-43. We could attach those as stipulations to a motion to accept. Am I correct in that, staff? Can I ask questions? of
I
staff?
agree with you on
Okay,
that understanding.
Okay. Great.
Well, just to be clear, the underlined portion is the new text amendments that we just approved a few weeks ago. The number one is already there.
We never approved them. We recommended approval. And they haven't been approved yet.
Oh, not even number one?
Well, anything from the May till now.
So number one, the permit has been obtained by the US EPA for Class 6 injection well, that was already approved by the county board. So anything that's underlined has not yet been approved by the county board.
Correct.
That's correct, but I don't know for sure that we couldn't attach them.
Oh, absolutely, but, yeah. I mean, number one, we wouldn't necessarily need to attach because that's already in the code.
Okay, I'll start. I think, when we're presented with anything new like this, we're all very hesitant to make a decision. It's hard to make a decision, for one thing. Everything we're hearing is new and for the first time, so it's a lot to take in. And a lot of you guys have been here and know that. But again, just like many of our other cases, and we've sat through this a lot before, what I find myself doing is listening and determining expertise level, what our parameters are, and where I stand and how I feel about what's been presented under those parameters. And I think that's something, we all have to remember to continue to apply where this is. And for me, I feel very much that we heard from some pretty established experts in the field. I felt very fortunate to be able to hear from what sounds like a world-renowned expert from U of I on this whole thing. That's a beginning for me.
I guess I feel like it is new, and we only have one chance to do this right. And I guess I question why we have to go through this process at this moment in time. And I realize, the EPA has not approved their permit as yet, and they may not approve their permit at all. They might wait 18 months, 24 months, whatever, to approve it. And I guess if we delayed action on this special use permit until we had that EPA permit in hand, it might give us an opportunity to refine our text amendment. Maybe there's a piece of the EPA regulation that we want to impose a few more restrictions on. And I think hearing from Trevor Sierra, we have that ability. And I guess I just wonder why we have to do it, take action at this moment in time.
I would say because we have an application before us.
Well, but I think clearly we could say they do not have their EPA permit in hand, and so they don't meet number one. So we could vote to.
But you're not really voting to approve the well, you're voting to approve the special use.
That's correct, but they have not fulfilled the zoning code that we have in place.
True, but it will not be approved until they do. If they don't get the EPA permit, if it all dies out, it's dead in the water anyway.
So what happens if in a year's time, we decide that we want to put something else in our text amendment to regulate this? And I'm hard pressed to come up with an example. But, maybe we want to change the setbacks, or maybe we want a little different wording or something. If, once we approve this special use for this well, we can't go back and impose additional restrictions on that. Do you see what I'm saying?
And we have changed our special use requirements on many different things. We've changed setbacks, we've done all of that. It's, you know, these regulations do change, and I understand the hesitancy, believe me, to make a decision to move forward. The other thing I wanted to point out is, and I'm putting this out there for pushback, when you say that they haven't, that we could deny it based upon the fact that they don't have their US EPA Class 6 approval. We approve wind farms based on getting approval, getting road commissioner agreements or road agreements. We approve different things with these things that aren't before us yet, but making them a requirement of getting that done. I'm not sure how this differs. And again, I'm putting this out there because we need to be conscious of what's going to hold up should it go to court.
Yeah, that reminds me, we approved a lot of solar farms that did not get approved based on the state lotteries, you know. So back on number one, the permit has been obtained by USP EPA for an additional well. If we approve this, then our approval would be pending a pending approval of the US EPA.
I think one of our biggest issues that we actually, you know, aside from water safety, which the EPA is looking at, is the emergency response or the safety, working with the emergency response teams and what they have or what they've been working on. And I don't feel I saw any of that. I didn't see any beginnings of that really, or major discussion in that. That's a concern of mine. It's a concern of others here. And that's one thing I feel is quite inadequate here.
We have language in our new amendment, in our new use standards that addresses that.
But I'm looking at that and it says work, I mean, I think it's pretty, in view of what our discussion, I think this language is very weak. I mean, it just says the owner shall work with the local fire. It doesn't say they have to come up with a plan. It doesn't have to be approved. It doesn't have to, you know, and fund an emergency response plan. Well, what happens if the company, you know, wants one response plan and that's the emergency officials think it's inadequate? Then what happens? I mean, I think we've got some issues with our text amendments personally.
But again, I would point back to our current road commissioner situation. And I'm blanking on her name, but the person from the county board came in and said, you know, we've learned from our wind farm experience in that we have huge exposure in our road. And this is where they determine they have their biggest exposure here. We do not get down into the nitty-gritty of the plan, of the agreement. We leave that to the county roads, to the people who know about this. We simply say, you guys got to figure it out. It's got to be there. That's a stipulation. You have to agree on it. And I think if I were to draw parallels here, It would be the same thing with our emergency response people. We're not going to get down into the nitty-gritty of what the actual emergency response plan is.
But it doesn't even say in this text amendment that they have to agree.
It
But I
says,
think when we were doing that, this last amendment, we actually said we don't want to get it down to a point because we might miss something.
Exactly.
And so we were leaving it more open to let the experts say what they needed. And I know they're not held to that thing, but the applicants actually agreed to do that, you know, whatever that was, that they would agree to do it. But I think that was sort of part, you say it's vague, but I think we did that purposely to not miss something.
this is pointing at an emergency management agency, which I think is good. And local fire departments, which covers that aspect too.
Going back to what Julia said about the road commissioner and stuff like that, it's the same principle. It just say, you know, they got to work it out. And it could be that emergency response puts out so much of a thing that they have to comply to. They say, well, we don't want to do it. I mean, it could go the other way. And we're not experts at that. And it, you know, and I don't think we want to put this down to the brass tack.
Well, I understand, I listened to Lee Klein, and I understand that we were purposely vague, but I'm looking at this now, it just says we will work with the local fire department and emergency management agency to develop and fund an emergency plan. Well, there's no, who decides when the plan is final? And who decides what's acceptable or not? And who's the arbitrator? If the two parties disagree, who makes that decision? Because we've already issued a special use permit and so it really is the zoning office, or it's Phil or somebody that says, no, you guys need to continue to work it out.
Just as for a road plan, it has to be signed by both parties. It would be the same for the emergency response plan.
Okay.
That it would have to be signed by both parties, or the special use permit is not issued.
And I hate to be pedantic, but it doesn't say it has to be signed. It just say they have to work together. I mean.
Okay, well, we can say it has to be signed.
You're awful quiet, Shirley. You gotta got something to say about this, don't you?
Well, I will say, I agree with Julia in that I think this company has demonstrated a commitment to doing the right thing, and I realize that there's a lot of things that are details left to be decided, but, you know, I do feel comfortable that this is a somewhat local organization. People live in the area, drink from the Muhammad Aquifer, and, you know, I am satisfied that if we're going to do business with a company, this is a good company to do business with. So I will give you that, so.
Well, if you really listen to the experts that really, the one that really stood out to me was Mr. Whitaker. And I think he really showed us how it works. And I think it's made you feel like that it might be possible. And then we got this rock, you know, if we got 900 feet of rock, isn't that what they testified to? About 900 feet of rock that they're going through? Yeah, something like that. And they've done the seismic tests on the thing, and there's no faults in it. They wouldn't do it. I mean, there's a lot of work been done on this. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I don't know. I mean, I have my reserves on it too. But I think, go back to what Leah Klein said, you know, we've only got a little caveat that we can work on in this deal. And I think that is what we've worked on with these restrictions. I think that's what we ought to be focusing on, because the well doesn't really matter to us either way. We can't stop the well. If they say they're gonna drill it, all we can do is try and regulate it.
Well, we can't stop, we can't take in consideration the safety of the water as we consider the approval of the well. I mean, right, exactly, exactly.
Yeah, I agree, Jim. I think the science is on the applicant's side.
How do you want to do it? You want me to read the standards? They're pretty long. Have everybody got them in front of them? Why don't we read the proposed use? I can just read what the standard's supposed to be, rather than reading the whole thing. Is that okay? Standard number 1 says, the proposed special use will not be detrimental to or endanger the health, safety, morals, comfort, or welfare of the public. Now, is that standard met? Boy, you're surely smiling. We got her to talk.
I said it all depends on how you look at it.
So what do you think?
No. It's my opinion.
I go back to the science, and I think that they're taking, it's, the science is saying that this is okay. We're putting it down there underneath that rock, 1,000 feet of it. We're protecting, they're doing everything they can to protect, to make it safe. The proposed special use will not be detrimental or endanger the health, safety, morals, comfort, or welfare of the public.
I think when we take in consideration the parts that we can take into consideration, which would be if the well were to leak into the air, I do not feel that it would be a huge danger to the health and welfare of the public. Given what we heard from Mr. Whitaker stating how quickly it dissipates, how quickly CO2 dissipates, paying attention to where the wells are located. Again, this is for that part that we can regulate, the health and welfare, where that's concerned. I did not hear anything that really convinced me that it wasn't safe.
And I go back to the EPA process, there's all kinds of safety built into this project.
What do you think, Brian?
We did hear from some pretty fantastic expert witnesses, there's no doubt about it. But I also feel like we heard them expert witnesses from both sides. And unfortunately, we didn't have high-powered, you might say, well-funded on both sides. I feel like there was maybe that lacked, because I think the citizen scientist side of things is real. I do believe there's people that have dedicated their lives to help preserve our environment, and those people all spoke very passionately tonight and previous nights as well. So I'm on both sides. We're dealing with something that is incredibly dangerous, but then you've got people that made their arguments that this is an incredibly beneficial product, a plant food. We heard that it's a plant food. So it's a difficult one to quantify because, yeah, it is deadly, and we understand that, but it's also a fertilizer. We also talked about in comparing how the wind farms, and we consider the environmental aspects and benefits of that and the potential issues with infrasound, intrasound, the vibrations in the land, and taking into consideration these things that we can see and things that we can measure. And now we're dealing with something that's incredibly complex, and we're talking about models and talking about things that we can't see. And that's where I have some pause and concern that with it being such a new process, are we really able to truly have everything that we need to move forward with this? And so that's where I'm torn on both sides, and Yeah, I'm not very well spoken, but thanks.
And I think you bring up really good point. Is it a new process? I think we heard testimony to both ends of that. That this has been used out there. We all know we live in an area where we have natural gas put into similar cavities. Another dangerous in, you know, in concentration, dangerous, well, gas in concentration, but we heard testimony that this is a process that's been used for a long time. Obviously, we've also heard testimony and know that we don't have a lot of CO2 sequestration simply for the sake of sequestration out there.
Are we talking about, are we going through the standards with the stipulations in place? And I'm talking about specifically the 1,500 feet setback. Because no, I would say it's not safe if we don't have that 1,500 setback.
I think that's a great point.
So, I mean, can we agree that all of the stipulations that are currently in our text amendment, are all of the language that are in our text amendment will be stipulations and then go through the standards?
I think we should state the stipulation that you want with it, that it has to, I think we
Well,
need
then
to state it.
I would support the 1,500 foot setback. I mean, I don't think it's 100% completely fail-safe, but I think it's a risk that is worth assuming, provided we've got that 1,500 foot setback.
I would be very willing to put that at the end, like we
Yeah,
typically do.
I
Yep.
mean-
The only problem we got with that was we got one tonight that's asked for it to be closer. So it would be a variance for one of those wells. And it's the person that's living in the house. But it would be a one-time thing, I would say. And the only reason I say that is because the application's already been done to the EPA. He's already said, I don't have a problem with it. And so I would say if you were to pass this tonight with those stipulations, just one of them would have a variance on it. Would you agree to that or not?
Are you sure there's one with
Yeah.
the residents
Yeah,
within?
it's
One's
1,000.
within 1,000 feet.
I mean, I hate to take a hard line, but I'm inclined to say 1,500 feet is 1,500 feet and not grant a variance. But
Because let's say there would have to be full disclosure if that house was sold.
Right.
Or something, because that person may not know about this under the,
Well, the person has testified in front of us, Mr. Young. He's the one that the well is closest to his house, 1,000 feet. And so that's the one you'd have to consider. And he says, I don't care. He said it several times. So I'm thinking that why would I care if he doesn't care? But it's just one person.
Agree, yep. And it may not be any language necessary for a variance. He's already signed off.
I don't know how we handle that. We get to it, but I just want to bring it out because you understand my point.
well, how would that work? I mean, we allow this variance, but does that mean that no development if the well, it's 10 o'clock, I'm usually asleep by now, but if the well were to be placed, then no one could develop, or no one, no home could be built or within that 1,000 feet. I mean,
1,500. I mean, we'll make it 1,500. It's just going to be exception for one well. And
Okay.
see, and anyone that would come in front of us for any additional CO2 wells would have to meet the standards or ask for a variance.
okay.
That's the way I would see it. And as far as standard number one goes, I think it can be met, but I'm not sure that something couldn't go wrong too. But I think that there's going to be things in place to take care of it. And so that's my opinion on one, if you wanted it. Ready to move on? Standard number two says the proposed special use will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity for purposes already permitted or substantially diminished property values in the intermediate area. In the immediate area.
I think it's met. It's agricultural land. Yep.
Have we?
I mean, we certainly had people who would live in the immediate area who felt that it would reduce their enjoyment, largely because it would increase their worry, if I'm to put it out there. But I don't know. I didn't feel like I had any concrete evidence to that.
I guess so.
Okay, standard number three, the proposed special use will not impede the orderly development of the surrounding property for uses permitted in the district. Is that standard met?
I think it's met.
It's suitable for crop production.
You okay, Ruth?
Yes.
Number four, adequate utilities, access roads, drainage, and/or other necessary facilities have been or will be provided. I think they testified that road commissioner had been talked to and all that, so. What do you think?
I think so too. And he indicated that they were a good partner in the test wells, that they worked with him really well. And he was here to testify to that.
Again, I'd like to make sure that we stipulate that they have road agreements in place before it's issued.
Adequate measures have been or will be taken to provide ingress and egress to minimize traffic congestion on the public streets. I don't think that's a problem. But is everybody okay with that one?
Yes.
think we're down to 6. Establishment, maintenance, and operation of the special use will be in conformance with the intent of the district in which the special use is proposed to be located.
It's a farming community.
We're not farming.
I was gonna say, does it have to do with farming though? I mean, is this a farming?
It is ag related.
It is ag related.
Is it okay? Yeah. That was 6, right? The proposed special use in all other respects conforms to the applicable regulations of the district in which it is located.
We've heard several farmers come testify that this is important to them. And it's in the agricultural district and it's compatible. I think this standard is met.
Well, I think we're ready for some kind of a motion. I don't know what it is, but if somebody wants to try.
I would move we approve case, is it 2307? SU, there, it's here somewhere.
2306.
It is 2306, it's,
It's 06.
okay, 2306. Is it SU 2306? Okay. And for stipulations, we attach the use standards 350-43. As stipulations. I think that's, some of them are already in there, but
Well, I think you have to be specific about what you want in there, though. Because 350-43 is,
okay.
So you need to be specific with the standards that you want in there.
Okay. Stipulations would include carbon dioxide sequestration well to be not located within 1,500 feet of an occupied residence, a livestock shelter, a school, a community building, or manufacturing commercial building. Lighting shall be installed for security and safety purposes only. All lighting shall be shielded so that there's no glare that extends substantially beyond the boundaries of the CO2 sequestration facility. An applicant or owner shall, okay, maybe let's think about this one for a minute. The applicant or owner shall work with the local fire department and emergency management agencies to develop and fund an emergency response plan, evacuation plan, required equipment purchases, adequate training, and certifications.
And the agreement must be signed
And an agreement shall be signed
by all parties.
by all parties. Yep, that works. An applicant or owner shall enter into a road use agreement with agencies having jurisdiction on the roads to be used for construction, operation, and maintenance of facility, which shall include at a minimum the following: conduct a pre-construction baseline survey, determine existing road conditions for assessing potential future damage, secure financial assurance in a reasonable amount agreed to by relevant parties for the purpose of repairing any damage to the public roads caused by constructing, operating, or maintaining the CO2 sequestration facility, and provide the Director of Building and Zoning with a signed copy of any agreements pertaining to the use of public roads. Is there others that this board would like to add to that? If not, I'm looking for a second myself.
Yeah, I think we need to say, within 1,500 feet unless assigned agreement or
Variance.
assigned variance by a resident.
I think we can actually put a well number in there if we can find it.
Okay. Is it well number 3? Well. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
So it would be a waiver for well number 1 to be 1,000 feet.
We would like to add that there will be a waiver for well number 1 to allow a residence within 1,000 feet. A waiver for the residents. Okay.
And do you have to put in there the number 1, a permit has been obtained by the U.S.? Do we need to put that as a stipulation?
That was already.
Yeah, okay. Just checking.
Absolutely. That's a good check. I'll second.
So we have a motion by Dean, a second by Julia Turner. You want to read back what the stipulations are going to be, or we need to, or not? No? We don't have to, I don't think.
I understand that the stipulations are what was approved in the draft recommendation of the county board, plus you wanted in and the agreement signed and the waiver for well number 1 to allow residents to be 1,000 feet from it.
Well, I think he added, for number 4, he added some additional language that's not necessarily, well, unless I've got an outdated copy of the proposed text amendment.
Would you like to look at this one to see if it's what you're talking about?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have I was looking at an outdated copy.
Wait, no, that's the court reporters.
Okay.
The whole table, twice. I think we're ready for a roll call vote.
Dear Wester,
Yes.
Bangert,
Yes.
Dean,
Yes.
Turner,
Yes.
Novosad,
Yes.
Finnegan.
Yes.
This will go to the county board a week from Thursday, recommending approval as, with the stipulations as recommended.